Welcome to the CSG Law Firm Podcast, where we talk all things law firm finance, operations, strategies, and feature those who have dared to embrace bold changes in the legal landscape. I'm your host, Chelsea Williams, founder of Core Solutions Group and chief financial architect for law firms since 2017. I get the rare glimpse behind the curtain and into operations, mindset, and money habits that make or break law firms. Since COVID, everything we thought we knew about how law firms should run, look, and feel have been shattered. And out of that disruption, a new kind of law firm owner has emerged, one who's bold enough to build outside the box. Around here, we spotlight those renegades, owners who blend legal brilliance with real business strategy, who build boldly, think creatively, and know that money isn't just math, it's mindset. We don't shy away from hard truths. We lean in with curiosity, grit, and a little humor. Whether you're scaling, stabilizing, or just trying to stay sane, you'll find stories, strategies, and straight talk to help you run a more profitable, value-driven law firm. So grab your coffee or your case files and let's get into it. Because it's time to ditch the stuffy suits and take control of your cash flow, build something bold, and prioritize protecting profits in your pocket. So one of the things that I immediately recognized about you was your entrepreneurial mindset. And so we came up with the topic of, this sucks. How can I make money off of it?
Yes, this sucks. How can I use this to make money?
I use this to make money. Yeah. So the combination between, your entrepreneurial side coming through and then also this mindset that is so rare. I'm like, we have to make an episode. So start with telling us your story about how you came to embrace these mindsets.
Sure. And Chelsea, thanks you so much for having me on. And it's really been so great to talk to you and to get to know you and delighted to spend this time with you and to talk about what the strange things going on in my head. So yeah, I came out of big law, but I also come out of a family of entrepreneurs and spent time myself running companies. I left the big law firm to start a company with my wife that we ran for more than 10 years. I spent time in-house, both as a GC and later, purely in a sort of executive general manager type role for a big operation. And born of that was sort of like trying to marry sort of the way I think as an entrepreneur and the way I see other people think as an entrepreneur and as a business person with the skills and requirements and things I got to do as a lawyer. And part of what I realized was, hey, I keep seeing this thing going on and this sucks. How do I use it to make money? And I've seen that in my client, my longest client and a dear friend made his fortune because his software company came up with a fix for the Y2K bug, the whole Y2K thing back in your childhood. That looked pretty scary. It sucked. And he used it to make money. There was a time when we drove in our cars and all we had was the radio and we went for walks and we had to listen to music. But what if I wanted to learn? What if I felt lonely? And what if I wanted to hear other interesting people? And that kind of sucked. And now there's podcasts, right? This is the idea. And the cool thing is it's also kind of the idea behind my law firm, Princeton Business Law, that we started it. I wanted to be a law firm for, people who thought oddly or differently the way that I do as an entrepreneur and who wanted both, wanted legal advice, top-notch legal advice. I've been to the big firm in the GC world, but also wanted it so that it fit entrepreneurs. And the mindsets and the law firm and everything, I hope, blend together to bring that about. But what occurred to me is how often in entrepreneurship, opportunity is born of a problem, a setback, a crisis, right? That's what's the saying, never waste a good crisis, right? And even the thing that, the very old saying from before my time, right? Build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. It's like, well, I'm only building a mousetrap because I've got mice. That's the idea.
I love it. And my version of that, of this sucks, how can we make money from it? So I have kids and my daughter, when she was younger, we used to watch and love that movie Robots. I don't know if you've ever seen Robots. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the entrepreneurial robot has a mantra and he's like, see a need, fill a need. And that is his business motto. It's like when something happens, be the solution. And that can be profitable. And I actually just did a podcast episode. It hasn't aired yet, for my other podcast about the current economy and how people are completely freaking out and, they're feeling the stress and they're taking on the fear. And the theme of that podcast was the same exact thing. It's like there are absolutely people seeing opportunities right now, taking advantage of them and profiting from them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, one of the things that I really appreciate about you and how your mind works, it's not weird, it's actually how we thrive. And I think in my experience working with so many lawyers over my 8-year now career, law school didn't teach them entrepreneurship. In fact, I think some components of law school make it more difficult to identify and adapt the entrepreneurial mindset. Can you speak to
Yep.
that challenge?
Yeah, totally. I think that's right. Particularly now, I haven't been to law school in a very long time. I'm about to go to my law school reunion. And so things have changed, and you see entrepreneurship much more in the education system, even in elite colleges and universities. There is more entrepreneurship. When I went to law school, I went to University of Pennsylvania. I had to go across to the Wharton School to get a class in entrepreneurship. I think things are more blended now, but there is still something about what I think of as the big moving sidewalk, that as a law student and as a young lawyer, it's really easy to step on that sidewalk and it pulls you off in a direction, and you didn't know you were heading in that direction and you couldn't get off, but it feels that way, right? Like I'm pulled into big law, like I'm pulled into the realities if I join a trial firm of what that's all about. And it is hard to look around and see the other opportunities and to think of yourself as an entrepreneur. I think the advantages for new lawyers and younger lawyers now is growing up in a world of social media, personal branding. We all have profiles. We have LinkedIn. Most of us do. Where you're already thinking about, I have a brand. I am my own business. I don't know that I'm going to be in this firm forever. I don't know that I'll be practicing this kind of law forever. I have to make my own opportunities. I think that comes a little more naturally in this communications environment. But there is still something about law school, and also something about what is frequently called the practice of law for entrepreneurs that you hope to learn off of. And that is, a lot of the time, it's really about venture capital companies representing VCs, representing private equity interests. And those are actually larger money interests. They have their own way of doing things. Frequently, I represent founders. I represent the actual business owners and operators. I certainly do work for private equity interests too, and love it and happy to have them. But the work I do for founders has led me to realize that a lot of what comes out of big law firms on behalf of quote unquote entrepreneurs is really documentation for the investor class. And that makes it more complex, more opaque than it needs to be, and tends not to be pro-founder in its meaning. So one of the things that I do in my firm is to try and get those documents to be more about the business owner and the founder and their rights. But that atmosphere, as people start legal careers and look to develop legal careers, can cloud it, right? Just like when you say entrepreneur, people think Shark Tank. But Shark Tank unicorn style companies are like, 1% of the world of entrepreneurship. Most entrepreneurial companies are bootstrap, maybe family owned or friend owned companies. They can be making a ton of money. They can be doing really well, and they have no interest in bringing in outside investors or flipping the business, right? They're making money by being a company and solving the problem. Mm-hmm. And that's harder to see from a law firm seat. I'll, if you want to hear it, I'll tell you one more anecdote, which is, so again, I went to law school decades ago. Okay. And at the time, I was the only person in my law school class who had been in and run a business before I went to law school. I think that it's not quite as unusual now as it was then, but at the time I was the only one. And I remember on like the second day of contracts class, the professor was talking about non-compete agreements and how they worked. And, basically asked the question, why would anyone enter into a non-compete? And I sit back, I deliberately, I remember this really clearly. I sat back and waited, and everyone's like, how could anyone sign this? It's ridiculous. Anyone who reads this would know it's an infringement on your rights. And, you can't go to work. And how can you stand for this? Why does the law permit this? And, there was sort of all this law student outrage. And finally, I raised my hand because no one else was saying it. And I said, the reason that a worker would sign a non-compete agreement is they need the job. They need the work. And if the boss says you have to sign this to get the job, they will say, where do I sign, boss? Because I need the paycheck. And somehow that had not penetrated into law school. Now, I think that's different now. I think there are many more students who go out of college, they work for a while, they come back to law school, and man, they know the meaning of a paycheck. But that still has stuck with me in terms of making sure we look beyond what we think lawyers do to what our clients need. And that's something that you and I will probably keep talking about, because to me, it also comes down to the way your work product works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we have a lot of listeners who are around your age. It's not something, and I love that college is evolving and the experience is evolving, and they're incorporating this more entrepreneurial side to things and starting to think outside of the box. But for the people who weren't able to have that experience, I want to go back to this sucks, how can I profit off of it? Because I think this is where we can help them shift that perspective and give them some insight into how to think like an entrepreneur. And so I know you have a lot of stories that can serve as proof and show the line of thinking, the creativity that solved the problem in a profitable way. But what is some of your experiences that you've been through or that your clients have been through where it was like, this sucks, how can I make money off of it?
Yeah, something there's, I mean, first I'll tell you some of my story, I guess, which is, what's something that sucks? Getting laid off sucks. And on the other hand, a lot of people got laid off in the great financial crisis, 2008 to 2013 ish, me included, twice. And a lot of other people got laid off, and a lot of those people got laid off, started their own businesses. And the same thing happened in the pandemic, by the way. And, the pandemic sucked big time. And a lot of people responded to it by saying, I'm working from home and this is okay. And maybe I'm just going to go off on my own now. And maybe I got laid off and I have to go out on my own now. What am I going to do sitting here in the living room? So those hardships gave birth to companies. And it was like that for me. I worked in very senior positions, making a lot of money for my companies, each of which sort of decided they wanted a better quarter. And a good way to do that was to say goodbye to Jason. I've seen that movie now. I've seen how that movie ends, and I didn't want to see the end of that movie again. But I liked the times when I worked for myself. I liked building my own team and running my own team. And also I thought, I have experience that I can bring to other clients, to other entrepreneurial clients, in terms of this is how things are done inside companies. This is what happens in big law firms. How do we bring that to the world of entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurs have their own risk threshold and profile. They have their risks they would take, larger companies would never take. Like they'll bet on their success every day of the week. Their risks bigger companies would take that entrepreneurs won't take, like cash flow risks. It's a different way of thinking. Every legal question, rather, is a business question. Every question, Jason, what do I do about this, is what do I have to do? What can I get away with not doing? What's going to do best for my business model? It's mixed questions of business and law. And it occurred to me, I can help people solve those problems. I can build a business around that. And that was me saying some things that sucked and some stuff that sucked for me, and and trying to go on from there. I think, the other example I would give is, so I actually started two companies after the financial crisis. One was this law firm, and the other was a consulting company, because I came out of the world of corporate compliance, actually had developed a reputation as a thought leader in compliance education over that, 10, 15 years in that industry. Picked up my credential as a certified compliance and ethics professional. I wanted to use that. And some of the people who wanted me to do that didn't want to hire a law firm. They just wanted what was in my head. So I started a consultancy, also because the ethics rules of my state are such that I cannot consult out of a law firm, and a law firm should not be offering pure consulting practices. So I needed to start two companies. And over time, they've pivoted. One's taken the lead, one's taken the back seat. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of the work from my consultancy went poof, right? There weren't a lot of people getting together in one place for corporate training anymore. There were not big training events. There were not big contracts. The kinds of stuff I did from my consultancy, Lead Good, went away. I pivoted my consultancy to focus on neurodivergence in the workplace, which is another whole conversation we can have. But I also saw this wave of entrepreneurs starting, put the law firm in the lead, and the law firm's grown great over the last 5 years because of that. And that was because we had my team and I had hands-on entrepreneurial experience, had a lot of it, top flight legal training and expectations. And I think the other thing that goes into the attitude of the entrepreneur, and if I may say, the attitude of the firm I'm building, is that you're a closer. And I realized this from my times as a general counsel, and I was chief legal officer for a software as a service company. And we had salespeople and big sales teams, and they went out and did stuff. And the end of the selling process was getting the client to sell a software license agreement, which put me in a room with the buyer and the buyer's lawyer negotiating the software license agreement. And it occurred to me, I'm the closer for this company. It's like if I negotiate this contract wrong, we lose the sale, and that's not the idea. And so that helped me realize that for companies, not just entrepreneurial companies, the contract with your client is the closing activity. And that contract better not scare off the clients. It needs to be written in a way where the clients know what's going on. And that is another, that's another thing that's really sort of guided, I think guided what we're trying to do as a firm. And there's something I realized about mindset, Chelsea, that's kind of a pep talk I have to give myself from time to time, and that I have to give my clients, and I guess that I would pass along to your listeners, which is, if you do a SWOT analysis of your own entrepreneurial business, of your own small firm, right, you're going to come up with weaknesses like, we're small, we don't have a lot of resources, we do a lot of things by the skin of our teeth, we have to make a lot of decisions on the fly at the last minute without complete information. And then you list your strengths, and it's things like, well, we're nimble, we're agile, we're resourceful, we're used to making, the thing I always say is like, you give us lemonade and we make nuclear reactors, and when you look at that SWOT analysis, you realize, wait a minute, my weaknesses are my strengths. It's just the opposite side of the same coin. The fact that we're small and we're resourceful is what makes us nimble and agile, right? So you have to remind yourself that this is who you are. This is the field you're on. And I could kick myself for that stuff, or I could celebrate it. I could say, yeah, it sucks, and this is how I'm going to make money from it.
I love that. And what I'm thinking over here as you're talking about all of these things is like, first of all, it's never as bad as we think it is. If it's not the 2008 financial crisis, it's COVID. If it's not COVID, it's the current economy. Like, it is always going to be something. And so that's kind of where complacency is dangerous, right? Like, as an entrepreneur, part of what we have to figure out how to do is how to pivot, like you said. And even in these Like right now, we just created a mastermind for immigration law firm owners because
Mhm.
of everything that's going on in that space. And a lot of what these law firm owners are finding is that, yeah, this big thing happened. And what it's doing, actually, it's not really new. It's not necessarily that something new is happening, but what it did do is it stress tested our weaknesses and it broke. And now we have to fix them. And so at the end of all of this, they're going to come out stronger because, like you said, their weakness is their strength, and they expose the weaknesses and they're going to make that their strength, once they get everything patched up. And so, yeah, the art of the pivot. So you have these um, 8 mindsets that I want to give us enough time to talk about all of these because I love your 8 mindsets. So talk about
Thank
how
you.
that came about and let's start going through them.
Yeah. So in the consulting corporate compliance world, um, is where the 8 mindsets first came up, and I work a lot with my dear friend Nicole Rose, who's based in Australia. She's also an entrepreneur and lawyer and educator, and also just super creative, and she has her businesses, and thanks to the pandemic and the technology it gave birth to, here I am working regularly, like, on a almost daily basis for sometimes with another professional in Australia, and we're like making cool stuff together. And we now do a podcast together called the 8 Mindsets Podcast, and there's a companion website conveniently called the 8 Mindsets, um, that is about these ideas we came up with, and the 8 Mindsets are a crystallization of the way we thought about leading and educating and doing persuasion within an organization. But as an entrepreneur and as a lawyer for entrepreneurs, I realized, hey, there's more to these 8 mindsets. This is really generally about leadership, and it is certainly about the pivot and the way we can keep our eyes open to see the pivot, the way we can decide how to pivot, and the way we can approach that pivot with confidence, and I think with a better chance of success. And it still kind of boils down to these 8 mindsets. So I'll rattle them off, and then we can break them down how I think they apply in this world, if
Let's
that's
do
good.
it.
Okay, so the 8 mindsets are so I'm strapping on this mindset. These are like the glasses, not binoculars, but like the glasses, the viewfinder I'm looking through at the world through. So it's the mindset of the entrepreneur, the audience, storytellers, marketers, producers, collaborators, program executives, and buyers. And it's kind of a loop when we come back to the mindset of the entrepreneur. So I'll break that down if you want, right? So obviously the mindset of the entrepreneur, it's all about the mindset of the entrepreneur. In some way, these are all mindsets of the entrepreneur. But the idea behind all of them is, hey, innovate with what you got. Exercise creativity, resourcefulness, agility, resilience, like embrace those things. As I said, you may think of them as your weaknesses. They're also your strengths. That's the hand you're dealt. Use it. That's the mindset of an entrepreneur, and the thing as people who are leading law firms, we have to remind ourselves about. Okay,
I
so the
have
guys are offering. Yeah, go ahead, please.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I have a
Yeah,
specific question on that one.
please.
Because I love your description here, like innovate with what you have, utilize creativity, utilize resourcefulness, innovation, agility, and resilience. And it's never a lack of resources, only a lack of resourcefulness, right? And one of the things that I see, because my question to you is, what do you see in law firms specifically that stunt their creativity and their resourcefulness?
Wow. First, I don't want to pretend that I've got perfect vision into the life of other law firms. I've built myself my own nice cocoon. Thank you very much. And uh, and life in here is very nice. Some of the things I see are again our mindsets, and in a way this goes over into the second mindset, which is remembering to strap on the mindset of your audience, the mindset of your client base. If you're persuading the mindset of the learner, life is about them. It's not about you. And I think a mistake that lawyers make frequently, particularly coming out of education and maybe big firm training that we talked about, is, well, I need to sound like a lawyer. Right? Client comes to you and says, "Hey, can you help train my employees on this?" It's like, well, yes, I'm the lawyer, so I'm going to train your employees by telling them about the individual subsections of the Civil Rights Act and give them citations as I do it, because that's what lawyers do. Yeah, that's what lawyers do. No human being thinks that way outside of the law firm. Okay, it does not matter to the worker in a company what the section number is, what the actual legal language of that sentence is. And frankly, if you think about your audience, you don't want them making those legal rulings. You need to give them much more easily digested, shorter nuggets for how they pretty much stay out of trouble, and mostly when they need to know to go ask somebody who's the expert. That's the challenge. But as a lawyer, my head's all in the blue book, and how do I make those citations? And there's a lot of stuff about trying to sound like a lawyer. If I find this in templates, right? Everyone talking, oh, go to template, there are all these templates now, and use what you can get off Alexis. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's a starting point. But you know what? Those all sound like, those sound like the kinds of contracts that go into a file and no one ever reads them and no one ever uses them. And we had to sign something. And
I'm
if
laughing.
there's ever a lawsuit where, we're protected 8 ways from Sunday, but this is not a document for a closer. Right. So that is one of the ways I think a typical lawyer attitude gets in the way. I think another way, particularly if you come out of big law, there's an expectation about levels of resources. I think particularly in my world of being a business lawyer and a lawyer for small and medium-sized businesses, often in the big firm mentality, there is a disconnect between, frankly, the cost of the services and the business objective at hand. And I remember a time working for a big firm where it's, we spent $30,000-$40,000 doing the initial filing in some lawsuit. And then I realized, well, this whole lawsuit's fighting over $60,000. Well, we just spent half of it. Like, there has to be a different way to approach that. That doesn't,
Math doesn't
nobody
math.
watching a business model, does that make sense? Are there times that it makes sense? Yes. If I'm a big company and I want to create a reputation in the community, you can't push me around. And, I want to be the Goliath. And, okay, I get that. There are reasons why in your business model it may make sense. I don't want to create a precedent. Yes, I understand all that. But there are also times where, it's a $20,000 dispute. Well, the first thing I need to do is, like, how do we get out of this dispute for a few $1,000s? Maybe we can't, but I need to keep the business model in mind. And that's something that I think is easy to get lost in the processes and procedures of corporate law, and especially in litigation. And litigation's a bear in this way because it's really tough to keep litigation costs contained. The answer is, how to avoid litigation. So I'm rattling on here, Chelsea, but like, that's another thing I try to do with, like, contracts, is like, now the contract needs to be about how do we not get into trouble while we're doing business with each other? Because the last thing we want to do is be dropping money on litigation. It would be much easier if we just all did what we're supposed to do. And what is the document that tells me what we're all supposed to do? That would be our contract. So now the contract needs to read like a recipe card instead of like, whereas the party of the third part, fourth Robinette, triple I, little v says,
Yeah, I can see that. And I was laughing earlier because that was one thing I had to overcome coming from the financial space. Like, accounting is the language of business, right? And it is a language, it has terms. And I was laughing because I had to figure out how to speak human through my education of finance to get through and help people understand who didn't know numbers and who don't know finance and all of those things. So one of the things that I see that's done, back to my original question, the
Yeah.
creativity and the resourcefulness is money. And a mistake that I see law firm owners make, instead of tapping into creativity and how they could creatively solve a problem, they kind of throw money at the problem. So I love how those all weave in and, inevitably, to our audience. Like, it's about them. It's not about you. Like, speak their language, come across, in a way that they can really get it, and give them the tools they need in a way that they'll actually want to use them.
And empathy, I think, goes in all, a lot of what I'm talking about is in the world of corporate transactional law, but empathy, which is really what it is when you put on the mindset of your client and of your audience, empathy goes a long way in all kinds of practices. And I think, to me, the times when I have represented either companies like business owners dealing with a longtime employee who's become a problem, or longtime employees who have been, being shown the door, right? Those from both sides, that hurts like hell. That sucks big time. And I appreciate, as someone who owns a business and who has hired people and had to fire people, it's like when something goes wrong with your team, it hurts personally. That's part of your identity as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And just letting your client know, I get it. This sucks. It hurts. It's going to keep hurting. Is really important. There's, these stories get swapped around. I won't vouch for its complete accuracy, but I remember there was a story going around in the aughts that a major hospital chain wanted to change its policy and actually start apologizing to the families of patients who had bad outcomes. Like, the doctors wanted to say, I'm sorry it came out this way. We did what we could. And sort of the risk people at the hospital were like, no, don't do that. We are admitting liability. You can't do that. You can't give an inch. You can't show anything. And finally, a decision was made. No, we're going to be humans and we're going to express empathy. And the result I heard was that their number of lawsuits and liability went down by expressing empathy, by putting on the mindset of the audience. They actually improved their legal position, which is a reminder that most people don't sue for monetary reasons. They sue because they're pissed off. And if you can keep people from being pissed off, mindset of the audience, then that, that will lead to better legal outcomes. So that's where I try to put. These are all pep talks I try and give myself too, Chelsea. I'm a long way from perfect on this.
And it's an ongoing balance, right?
Yeah.
The balance between delivering the service and the framework and the black and white, and having that human component, because too much of either side is not going to serve you or your clients. So it's about striking that balance. And if everything's changing all the time and we have these things popping up, then it makes sense that it needs to be revisited consistently. It's kind of like you're a student of it for life. You're never truly a master, at that art.
Right. We practice law.
Yes.
I'm still practicing.
Yes. Exactly. Okay. So we got 8 mindsets. We got the
right. We did entrepreneur, audience.
Audience.
I'll rattle through some of them for the sake of time and your audience's patience. So the mindset of the storyteller, just a reminder, stories are what grab people, right? Your elevator pitch. What is your elevator pitch? And is there a story behind it? Because that's what captures imaginations. That's part of capturing empathy. When trial lawyers talk about, the first thing I needed to realize was, what's the theory of the case? Most of these cases are never going to get to a jury, but from the very beginning, I need to be thinking, what am I telling the jury? What's the theory of the case? That's storytelling. It's the same idea. How do I reduce this whole complex piece of litigation into a story, and ideally one line? Same thing for transactional negotiations, especially in the kind of setting I'm in, where frequently I am dealing with an imbalance of power. I'll represent a smaller business negotiating with a larger business. That comes up a lot. I need a good story. I need to be telling the story of why you want to work with this business, what's the value you're getting for this business, and why maybe this business, why you, Goliath, it's not in your best interest to make my business, the smaller business, actually go through that. And you do that with storytelling and with selling the story of the business and of the deal. And it really is that kind of exercise. Uh, there's the mindset of the marketer. To me, this is one that is really easily forgotten outside of the world of marketing and quote marketing and communications. Um, deep within the bowels of law firms, within corporate training and HR departments, really easy to lose sight of the mindset of the marketer, which is simply to learn from the people who persuade for a living. That there are people who have invested billions of dollars and made billions and billions more by knowing exactly what it is we do to persuade people to change their behavior, to win hearts and minds, so that when I open my wallet, I do a certain thing with the money that's inside of it. And I do a certain thing with my time. As lawyers, we also persuade for a living, but we do it in a different setting. We do it over a negotiating table, or we do it in a courtroom, or we do it in arbitration. But again, we have to persuade an audience and we have to meet them where we are. So
Why they
what
all
does
tie into each other? Like
they
we're
all
not
tie into
just
each other,
focused
right?
on one.
Right. So what do marketers do? They keep it short. I will tell the story of corporate training, compliance training, which again is an industry I come out of. How many compliance training courses these days are still 45 minutes, an hour? Here's your 2 hour mandatory California anti-harassment training. Why is it 2 hours? Because the law says we have to give you 2 hours of training every 2 years. Yeah, every 2 years. You could do that by giving me, 60 2-minute courses. All right. What does the marketer do? Well, last time I looked, most TV commercials were 30 seconds or shorter, and they seem to work. Political campaigns back when I was a child ran hour-long commercials with like speeches by the candidate. You don't see that anymore. It isn't because candidates can't, national candidates can't afford it. They have all the money they need to buy whatever marketing works. They don't run hour-long commercials anymore because they don't work. Okay. The lessons are out there. All we have to do is look and see, what do marketers do, and then try to follow along. This is how things get read, get used, get understood. Why do I think I know more than they do? And again, this is part of being a closer.
No, I appreciate that. It's so smart. Like, look at the people who do this, study the data, like take that shortcut, please.
Yeah. So then there's the mindset of the producer, what we call, what Nicole and I call the mindset of the producer. And that is, have a process, right? If I produce things for a living, like I'm a movie producer, I'm a TV producer, right? I have a process. I don't make it up the first time. It's like step 1, step 20, step 30. Make a process when you can make a process. It should be repeatable. It should be scalable. That is also, that's entrepreneurship 101, right? It's like, is it repeatable and scalable? But that also has to go for what we do as lawyers and what we make for our legal clients. Are we handing them something that is also repeatable and scalable? That's really where the value is. And Chelsea, I know for you and in your work, thinking about process is a big one, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I find that this is a great place where, like, if you're a lawyer and you're listening to this right now and you are telling yourself the story that, my practice is a unicorn, I don't see any potential for processes. I can promise you, if you can open up your mind to be a student and create a new narrative in your mind, there is absolutely a process and a system for whatever it is that you need. And by the way, processes and systems are the only way that you grow, scale, protect profits, exit profitably. Without them, it's not attractive to outside buyers, to team, and clients get an inconsistent result.
Let's talk after the show. Still learning, still working on that one, but
always
I know
a student.
yeah,
Yes.
always a student, only just practicing. So yeah, so mindset, that's what the mindset of the producer is about. And it's, in a way, it's also the mindset of what we call the mindset of the collaborator, right? Make a team. Even if you're solo, from whom can I learn? Who can help me out? How do I enjoy the benefits of working with other people? What's the team I can create? And it doesn't mean I have to hire somebody, although sometimes it does, and that can be great and that's very rewarding. It can also just be who do I collaborate with? For companies, frequently there is the board of directors that you do some formal stuff with, and then there's my board of advisors. So I do more, who we're not taking notes, and it's not part of corporate governance, and it's the people who tell me I'm full of it, and that's part of being a collaborator too. And I think for lawyers in particular, at least in my practice, this is important when it comes to knowing and teaming with experts in concentrations that I don't do. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I have decided over my many years of practicing law, one of the things I've decided is like, okay, these are areas that I have some familiarity in. I'm not going to dabble in them. I'm not going to dabble in tax law. I'm not going to dabble in patent prosecution. I mean, I was an intellectual property journalist for 10 years. I know the patent system. I know enough about the patent system to know I should not be drafting patent claims unless the only thing I do is draft patent claims, because that is a minefield. So I collaborate. Right? If a client needs something from me and it's something I don't personally know how to do, I've built a network of people that I would turn to. I'm still building that network of people I can turn to and say, I work with them in this area. And that creates what in networking circles, I'm also a member of BNI, and that's turned out to be, that was a pandemic decision I made. Like, I want to see people and it's a pandemic. What am I going to do? And it sucks. I'm going to join BNI. And I was like, wow, this is like paid off in so many different ways, not just in referrals, but also in having collaborators. And what in networking circles, whether it's BNI or Association for Corporate Growth or Vistage or whatever else, what people call power teams, right? These are the people, they're not in my company, but they are my strategic allies. We are passing business back and forth. We are collaborating all the time because we serve similar client bases from different points of view. And that's a critical mindset, I think, for a successful lawyer.
Yeah, I agree. I've always believed in be a master of few, not a jack of all trades. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Exactly.
So leaning on the people we know and finding people who know what we don't or who are better than we are in some areas. I mean, you've got to be able to do that as an entrepreneur.
I will quote my marketing guy, Josh Irons, who runs the marketing firm I rely on, and his saying for his firm is, we'd rather be your shot of whiskey than everybody's cup of tea.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
So 2 mindsets to go if we're gonna do the full list of 8. There's the mindset of the program executive. And let me spend some time, I guess, on this, Chelsea, a little bit of time, because this is like, where did this come from? Program executive, what do you mean? This, to me, this is something, Nicole and I went back and forth, like, what is this we're talking about? And this is the way we capsulated it. This is something kind of born of our times. There are all these communications channels now, right? It isn't just 2 or 3 ways of communicating with people. There's dozens of ways. There's hundreds of channels of communicating with people. There's all these technology possibilities. There's all of these technology processes I could tap into. There's all this disruption. And on top of that, the economy has gotten to a place where things that were 4 jobs at the turn of the millennium are 1 job now. Right. We've everyone's gone lean and everyone's laid off lots of people and then hired other people. And like any job description now used to be something 4 people did.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to do in this environment? And I was a big West Wing fan, right? And I remember the episode where President Bartlett is talking to Rob Lowe over a chessboard, and he says, "You have to see the whole board." Okay. What we have to do is we have to see the whole board, and we have to keep challenging ourselves to see the whole board. So you're a program executive, as in, don't think of yourself as running one show. Don't think of yourself even as running one network. You are running, just because you live in 2025, you are running a web of networks. You have a range of possibilities of things you need to do, and you have to master the whole board. You have to use one thing and trade it off against something else. In the world of marketing communications, this is, what message goes out on, Blue Sky and Instagram, and the other message goes on YouTube and LinkedIn, and what are the ways that I'm going to actually repeat the same message in all those places, and which thing goes where. That's part of being a program executive. I have content and I have channels. How am I going to distribute that content across channels? But then think that way about your business or about your practice, not just about the marketing of that practice, but just, again, seeing the whole board. I will say right now, and so in the pivot, you're seeing what sucks for your base, and then how do I bring what I have to bear against that? I think the other thing that comes up, and Chelsea, this is a place I am challenging myself now. Like, this is a current challenge I think my firm is facing, and I assume other firms are facing. What do we do about artificial intelligence? Mm-hmm. Right. I think if you say, "Oh, I'm all in on AI," look how easy this makes life. Well, if it's all about AI and AI can do it, then your clients don't need you. They can ask Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever they want just as well as you can, right? It's actually not enough, right? It may be faster. There may be a process. But what about quality? What about accuracy? What about the art of persuasion and being a lawyer? That's what you bring to the table. And so, as a program executive, you have to see the board and all the possibilities, and then you have to decide. I mean, maybe I should say you're an organist, right? I've got 150 different keys and pedals, and I'm going to play this chord with these three keys. Maybe to me, we have to become the AI artist. We have to become the AI whisperer, right? Think of AI as a paintbrush, not as the whole painting, and use it to deliver better value to our clients. I don't think it's yet apparent how to do that. The platforms I've played around with continue to hallucinate. They continue to get one result that's spectacular, another result it's like, oh man, that is so far off. The example I give to clients is, I had a client who said, "Oh, I had ChatGPT drafted. Can't you just review it?" And it's like, yes, I can spend 3 hours getting ChatGPT's outcome to be legally okay. Or I can spend 20 minutes doing the same thing from my own template that I've been massaging for 10 years. You choose. AI is nice and sexy. I got a faster way. It's called experience, right? And here, look at this ChatGPT document. You see how it says in this paragraph, like the 50th paragraph, buyer shall, and has all these duties of the buyer. It's like, you're the buyer. You don't want those duties. You want the seller to have those duties, because in this deal, you're the buyer. But ChatGPT doesn't know that. It doesn't know the context. It frankly doesn't even really know the contextual meaning of any of the words. It just knows this word sounds right after this other word, and I can predict what word sounds right next. That's what large language models at their heart are doing. Are they getting better? Of course, they're getting better. Are we going to have to stay super nimble about what to do with this new tool? Yes, we certainly are. We're going to have to adapt to the fact that, frankly, to me, standard research tools have gotten worse since AI has gotten better, because the vendors want me to buy their AI tool. At least that's how it looks to me as a buyer. So that's part of seeing the whole board and the mindset of what we call the mindset of the program executive. And then that's the mindset of the Chelsea, also the mindset of the buyer, right? You're going to have to rent it until you make it. What are you going to spend your precious money on? What are you going to throw money at? I like to throw it at things that are force multipliers. I like to throw it at things I don't know. For my practice, the first thing I spent money on was bookkeeping. And yeah, Chelsea, that's
Smart.
you can yeah, I can
Shout
back
out
you
to
up
the
on that one.
bookkeepers.
What am I doing? Spending all this time? I'm not an accountant. I don't know this stuff. Other people do. They are happy to do it for me, and they're happy to do it for me, and I can instead go bill. And I'm not an accountant, but I figured that one. I figured that one out. Um, and I think the same thing goes for buying technology, right? It's like I could completely sink every dollar I bill into technology. I can't do that. I need to think like a careful buyer about what I'm buying. And then finally, that takes us back to the entrepreneur, to the mindset of the entrepreneur itself. To me, it's a circle. We but at the end, it's the mindset of resilience of the entrepreneur. It's like I'm a survivor. I will find a way through this. I am
You
built to
really
weather the
have to be.
storms.
Yeah, because working a job, you get to clock out not only on a piece of paper or a time card digitally, but you get to clock out mentally. And as entrepreneurs, we've taken the responsibility of we don't actually get to do that. Some of us would like to think that there's a separation between work and home, but it's so easily pierced and it gets blurry. And so it is so important. And I love your 8 mindsets because to me it also sounds similar to the fact that as entrepreneurs, we wear multiple hats in our business, and they're all very important. And I think so. I had this question for you, but you actually already answered it, which is great because
Okay.
we already talked about what's for the future, and we're talking about AI. But another question to kind of leave our listeners with is wearing all the hats and being an entrepreneur can be overwhelming. Hearing all of these mindsets and everything that we've talked about from, making a situation that sucks, how can I make money out of it? What does it take to pivot? And all of these things that we really have to do as entrepreneurs. What would you say are just two of the most important things to focus on for the people that are feeling overwhelmed listening to all of this right now?
Wow. The first thing I would say is cut yourself some slack.
Yes.
Be gracious. Be gracious to yourself. To me, part of what I get out of thinking about the mindsets and thinking about the life of the entrepreneur is, and thinking about this sucks. How do I use it to make money? Is this is the name of the game. It isn't you. I mean, okay, yeah, sometimes it is you. You got to be aware where you have
To
to
the
where
mirror,
you have to
yes.
improve, right?
But life sucks in a lot
And
of different ways. You
right
got to pick your struggle. Yeah.
right, the definition of insanity, right? You keep doing the same thing, expect a different result. Yeah, okay, I'm guilty, in so many ways. But at the same time, give yourself the grace for being human.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself the grace of realizing what you have done and what you are accomplishing. Think about the value you are actually delivering to your clients. And to me, part of it is also, you know, you're having fun.
Yeah. Oh, I
Part of
love that.
and it should be fun, and you should think of it as fun, and the journey should be rewarding to you, because
Mm.
if you've taken an entrepreneur's choice, you have your own firm and you're running your own firm, you need to, there's not a, okay, there may be a destination at the end, but that's just not how the practice works, right? I finished this client, there's another client and another client, another client. When I was a journalist, right? We finished this edition. Now there's another one, and then there's another one, and it will be that way for as long as I have this job, right? Um, you need to enjoy the journey. You need to embrace
Mm.
the journey and what's going on. And I there's something I say to potentially new entrepreneurs when they think about starting a business, which is, I've learned that when you run your own business, life is great 13 days out of 14. The 14th day is payday. And suddenly on payday, instead of it being like, it doesn't matter how bad things are, suddenly there's money in my bank account. Now it doesn't matter how much fun I'm having. Suddenly I have to put money in other people's bank account, or in my own. And that's a challenge, but it also means you need to enjoy those other 13 days. And if you, I guess here's what I would say to lawyers who maybe are not in their own firm, right? If you're there and all you can think about is, man, I wouldn't do it that way. Boy, I think that's a mistake. Boy, this really came back to bite us. Do we have to keep doing it this way? I would do things in a different way. Like take those notes to yourself, file that stuff away, make the hypothetical thought in your head. What would I do in this situation? And then wait 3 months or 6 months and see if your answer was right, or if the managing partner's answer, if they made a different decision, was the right decision. A, learn from that, but B, if you keep thinking that way and you keep feeling like, I think I know the better way, you may be wired to have the entrepreneurial mindset and you should go off that way. And I know other people who are like found themselves in positions where they're running their own company, not just lawyers, they're running their own company, they're going through these struggles, they're challenging these mindsets, and they realize, you know what? I liked it when I was part of a bigger team. I liked it when I had my own world that I worried about, but I didn't worry about the whole world. I liked having resources anytime I needed them. And I was talking to somebody the other day and they're in a big organization. They were like, the problem is not money. If I decide we need to spend money on something, I could spend money on it, right? If you like that world, that's fine. That's who you are. That's your mindset. You may not be cut out for what we're doing. But if you do have that mindset and you think that way, then embrace it. Your strengths, your weaknesses, strap on these mindsets, be conscious of what you see when you strap on those mindsets, and think about delivering value to your clients. And, good times and bad, that carries me through.
Thanks for tuning in to the CSG Law Firm podcast. If today's conversation sparks something for you, an idea, a challenge, or even a little discomfort, that's exactly the point. We're here to rethink the way law firm owners approach money, leadership, and growth. If you're ready to dive deeper, connect with me and my team and learn more about Core Solutions Group and what we do, head on over to our website in the show notes, yourcoresolution.com. Because sometimes all it takes is a fresh perspective and the right people in your corner. Until next time, keep building with intention, lead with clarity, and remember, the numbers tell the story, but you get to write the next chapter.